My HOA thought they could control everything, even banning kids from playing in their own yards. But when I called the local news, their power trip ended in the most satisfying way. It started with a letter. I remember standing at the mailbox that morning, juggling my coffee and the usual stack of bills when I saw the envelope, plain white, stamped with the words, Homeowners Association Notice. My stomach sank. Everyone in our neighborhood knew that nothing good ever came in those envelopes. I tore it open right there on the driveway. Effective immediately, children are not permitted to play in common outdoor areas, including front yards, sidewalks, and cul-de-sacs. Noise complaints have increased, and the board has voted unanimously to prohibit outdoor play to maintain community standards. I had to reread it 3 times. I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. My HOA had actually banned children from playing outside. The audacity of it hit me like a punch. I glanced down the street where my daughter Emily and her friends usually rode their bikes in the afternoons. Their laughter was the heartbeat of our block, the thing that made our neighborhood feel alive. And now, what? Silence? I wasn't the only one fuming. Within an hour, our neighborhood Facebook group lit up like wildfire. Are they serious? One mom posted. My kids play outside every day. What are we supposed to do now? Another chimed in. This is beyond ridiculous, a dad added. We pay HOA dues so our kids can enjoy this neighborhood, not sit locked up inside. I scrolled furiously through the thread, my own anger building. Who even complained about kids playing? Wasn't that what a neighborhood was for? By lunchtime, I had cornered my neighbor, Sarah, at the end of the cul-de-sac. She was gripping the same letter, her face flushed with anger. They've lost their minds, she said, shaking the paper like it was a weapon. You know who complained, right? It's that grouchy couple in 17B. They hate everything. Dogs, kids, even Christmas lights. And now the HOA is bending over backward for them. I groaned. She was probably right. It always came down to 1 or 2 complainers with too much power. That evening, I tried to explain it to Emily. She was only 8, and her brow furrowed in confusion, as I told her she couldn't ride her bike out front anymore. But why? She asked softly. We're not hurting anyone. I didn't have an answer. All I could do was hug her tight while my anger simmered. Later, when I peeked out the window, the street was eerily quiet. No kids laughing, no basketballs bouncing, no chalk drawings in progress, just silence. And for the first time since we moved here, our neighborhood felt less like home, and more like a prison. I didn't know it then, but that stupid letter was the start of a fight I never imagined I'd have, a fight that would drag our whole community into chaos and eventually into the spotlight of the evening news. Do you think HOAS should have the power to control how kids play in their own neighborhood? The next few days were chaos. Everywhere I went, whether it was the school drop-off line, the coffee shop, or just walking down the block, neighbors were buzzing with the same topic, the ban. People were furious. At Sarah's house, a group of parents gathered on her porch one afternoon, clutching coffee cups like we were holding strategy weapons. Sarah's husband, Mike, slammed his fist on the table. This is insane. They can't just ban kids from playing outside. It's not even legal. A quieter neighbor, Jenny, shifted nervously in her chair. But it's the HOA. Don't they control everything? What if they fine us if the kids play outside anyway? That word, fine, hung in the air like smoke. Everyone had heard horror stories about HOA fines. Some neighbors got fined for grass that grew an inch too long, or for having the wrong color curtains visible from the street. The HOA loved flexing its power. The fear was real, but so was the anger. I found myself pacing Sarah's porch, my voice shaking. What's next? They'll ban pets? Or tell us what times we can sit on our own porches? They're already treating this place like a dictatorship. Heads nodded around me. People were scared, but beneath that fear was a bubbling rage. Later that week, I decided to attend the HOA board meeting. If they wanted to throw down rules like a monarchy, they were going to hear from me. The meeting room was a small, stuffy clubhouse, packed tighter than usual. Parents, kids in tow, couples who never showed up before. It was standing room only. At the front sat the board, 5 smug faces behind a long folding table. I knew most of them by sight. The president, Mr. Langley, always smug in his polo shirt, and Mrs. Parker, who never smiled unless it was at someone's expense. Langley cleared his throat and began, We understand there are concerns about the recent noise control measure. Noise control measure? Sarah muttered beside me. You mean the ban on childhood? Hands shot up. People interrupted. A dad shouted, This is ridiculous, while another mom demanded, Who even voted for this? The board tried to wave us off. Mrs. Parker actually smirked and said, We had multiple noise complaints. We are maintaining the peace and serenity of this community. I stood up, shaking. Peace and serenity? This is a family neighborhood. What kind of serenity are you trying to create by silencing children? This isn't a retirement home. A few people clapped, but Langley just gave me a patronizing smile. Ma'am, rules are rules. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, there are procedures for that. In that moment, I realized they didn't care. Not about us, not about the kids, not about community. They cared about control. Walking out of that meeting, my blood boiled. The parents around me whispered angrily, but I could see the same hesitation in their eyes. The HOA wanted us to roll over, but I wasn't about to let them win that easily. Would you confront the HOA directly or stay quiet to avoid conflict? The silence was the worst part. Within days of the HOA's ban, our once lively cul-de-sac turned into something out of a dystopian novel. Normally, you'd hear the sound of basketballs bouncing, kids chasing each other, scooters rattling down the pavement. Now, nothing but the hum of air conditioners and the occasional bark of a dog. The neighborhood felt dead. I watched from my front porch one afternoon as my daughter, Emma, sat on the steps, her soccer ball at her feet. She kept glancing toward the empty street, waiting for her friends to come out. None did. She sighed, hugged her knees, and whispered, I don't want to get you in trouble, Mom. That broke me. Inside, my neighbor Jenny texted me. Is your kid miserable too? Mine won't stop crying. She asked if she did something wrong. I clenched my teeth so hard it hurt. This wasn't just about noise. It was about kids being made to feel like criminals for being children. The HOA didn't just ban play, they stole joy. By the end of the week, Parents whispered about fines. One family down the street got a warning letter because their boys were seen tossing a football in their driveway. Another family was threatened with a $200 fine after their daughter rode her scooter unsupervised past 7 p.m. It was ridiculous. The HOA was out for blood, flexing their power on families who already felt trapped. The tension seeped into everything. Neighbors avoided walking dogs at the same time, afraid to be accused of gathering. Kids retreated indoors, glued to screens, their energy bottled up until it exploded in tantrums. One evening, Sarah invited a few of us moms over. We sat around her kitchen table, our kids upstairs in silence. Usually that would have been a good thing, but now the quiet felt heavy. I can't take it anymore, Sarah said, running her hands through her hair. This isn't living. My son is depressed. He doesn't even want to go outside at recess anymore. He thinks playing is wrong. Jenny wiped away tears. My daughter asked me if she's a bad neighbor. She's 7. What kind of message are we sending? I slammed my mug of coffee down. We can't let this continue. If they won't listen at the meetings, we need to make them listen another way. What do you mean? Sarah asked cautiously. I took a deep breath. I hadn't said this out loud before, but the words came out clear. We take this public. If the HOA wants to play dictator, let's show the world. People hate stories like this. Media eats it up. The room went quiet. Jenny looked terrified. Sarah looked intrigued. And me? I felt that spark of righteous fire in my chest. The HOA wanted to silence our kids, but maybe it was time to make some noise of our own. What's the most unreasonable rule you've ever heard from an HOA? Once the idea slipped out of my mouth, we take this public. I couldn't take it back. Sarah leaned forward, eyes shining with curiosity. You mean, like, the news? Yes, I said, feeling the conviction harden. The HOA thinks they're untouchable because everything happens quietly behind closed doors. But what if the world saw what they were doing? Imagine the headline, Neighborhood HOA bans children from playing outside. Who would side with them? Jenny bit her lip. But wouldn't that make things worse? What if they retaliate? They already are, I shot back, with fines, threats, and intimidation. What's worse than our kids being prisoners in their own homes? The room went quiet, and then Sarah whispered, I think you're right. That was the moment the plan was born. The next day, I started making calls. At first, I wasn't sure anyone would care. Local reporters probably got hundreds of complaints about potholes, zoning laws, or neighbor squabbles. But this wasn't just a squabble. It was kids' lives being affected. I called Channel 7 first. The receptionist sounded bored until I said the magic words. Our HOA banned children from playing outside, and now they're threatening families with fines. Her tone shifted instantly. Hold on. Let me transfer you to a producer. Within minutes, I was speaking to a woman named Melissa, who practically lit up at the story. You're telling me this is in your neighborhood? Do you have documentation? Any letters from the HOA? Oh, I have plenty, I assured her. I can email them tonight. Perfect. I think we'll want to send a reporter. My hands shook as I hung up the phone. This was it. That night, I told Sarah and Jenny what had happened. Sarah practically squealed, You're a genius. The news will eat them alive. But Jenny looked pale. What if they put our names on TV? What if we get sued? I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That's what they want, to scare us into silence. But if enough of us stand together, they can't go after just one family. They'll be exposed. Jenny didn't look convinced, but she didn't say no either. The reporter came 3 days later. A woman named Tasha, with a bright blazer and a cameraman trailing behind her, walked into my living room. She asked if I'd be willing to go on camera. I hesitated for a heartbeat. My stomach churned at the thought of my face plastered on TV, my words dissected by neighbors and strangers alike. But then I thought about Emma, sitting on the porch with her soccer ball, whispering, I don't want to get you in trouble, Mom. I nodded. Let's do it. Tasha smiled. Good. Because this is going to make waves. And just like that, our fight against the HOA was no longer just ours. It was about to go public. If this happened to you, would you pull your kids inside or fight back? The segment aired on a Wednesday evening. I'll never forget sitting on the couch with Emma curled up beside me, Sarah and Mike on the floor, and Jenny nervously chewing her nails. The anchor's voice cut through the room. Tonight, a shocking story out of Crestwood Estates. A local HOA has issued a controversial rule banning children from playing outside, sparking outrage among parents. Then the footage rolled. There I was, sitting at my kitchen table, speaking directly into the camera. My words echoed back at me. Children deserve the right to play. This is their home too. We won't let an HOA strip away their childhood. The cameraman had even captured Emma on the porch with her soccer ball, the picture of innocence and sadness. It was powerful, too powerful to ignore. The next morning, the story was everywhere. On Facebook feeds, local Twitter threads, even the neighborhood next door page. Comments poured in. This HOA is out of control. Who bans kids from playing? That's insane. Sue them. Parents from other towns reached out with messages of support, sharing their own HOA horror stories. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. But the HOA? They were furious. By noon, my phone buzzed with an official-looking email. Subject, violation of HOA Policy 6.1, defamation and unauthorized media contact. The body of the email dripped with legalese. By speaking to the press, you have misrepresented the HOA and caused reputational damage. We are considering fines and legal action. I read it aloud at Sarah's house, and she practically exploded. They're threatening you because you told the truth? That's intimidation. Jenny looked sick. What if they actually sue you? They have money, they have lawyers. I shook my head. Let them try. If they think the news was bad press, imagine the headlines when people find out they're threatening parents for speaking up. But inside, I was shaking. What if they really did have the power to ruin me financially? What if they could push us out of our home? That night, the HOA held an emergency meeting. The clubhouse parking lot was jam-packed. People streamed inside, buzzing with anger and curiosity. Langley, the HOA president, stood at the front, red-faced and sweating. He banged a gavel like he was some kind of judge. This board has been unfairly maligned in the media. These stories are exaggerated, false, and harmful to our community's reputation. Someone in the back shouted, "Then why are the kids still not allowed to play outside?" The room erupted with claps and cheers. Langley's face twisted. Order, order. But there was no order. Parents were done being quiet. One by one, voices rose, calling the rule unfair, demanding it be overturned. I stood up, heart racing. You can't silence us anymore. The whole city knows now. The more you fight this, the worse you look. For the first time, I saw fear flash across Langley's smug face. The HOA wasn't used to losing control, but they were slipping. Do you think HOAs sometimes abuse their power? The morning after the emergency meeting, a thick white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew immediately who it was from. Inside, my hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. Notice of fine, $500. Violation, conduct detrimental to the community. Media engagement without authorization. $500. Just like that. Sarah found me pacing on my porch with the paper crumpled in my fist. She snatched it out, read it, and nearly screamed. They're fining you for talking to the press? That's not even legal. Jenny, who'd come over for coffee, looked pale. This is exactly what I was afraid of. They're going to bury you in fines until you give up. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to steady my shaking hands. No, they're trying to scare me, but they don't get to win. If they think this will shut me up, they've got another thing coming. That's when I made my next move. I called Melissa, the Channel 7 producer. They fined me for speaking out, I told her, my voice trembling but fierce. $500 for detrimental conduct? Want a copy of the letter? She gasped. Are you serious? Oh, we're absolutely doing a follow-up on this. Within 24 hours, the second story aired. HOA fines. Mom $500 after she spoke to the news. The comments section exploded. Strangers rallied behind me, calling me brave, offering to start GoFundMe pages, even connecting me to attorneys who specialized in HOA abuse. The HOA had wanted to intimidate me. Instead, they had just lit a fire. But the retaliation didn't stop there. The very next day, my trash bins weren't collected. When I called the waste company, they told me they'd received a suspension notice from the HOA. My jaw dropped. They were actually messing with utilities now? Sarah stormed over when she heard. They're crossing every line. We can't just defend ourselves anymore. We need to attack. She was right. Defending wasn't enough. They had power, money, and a history of getting away with bullying. We needed backup. That night, I sat at my computer for hours researching, and that's when I found it. Case after case of HOAs being sued and losing when they overstepped their authority. Judges hated HOAs almost as much as the people living under them. I bookmarked attorneys, copied statutes, and even joined an online group called HOA Horror Stories. The support was overwhelming. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. The next HOA meeting was chaos. Parents came armed with printouts of laws, copies of fines, and even recordings of board members making threats. When Langley tried to gavel us down, someone shouted, "We'll see you in court." The room erupted with cheers. And for the first time since this all began, Langley's hand actually trembled as he slammed that gavel. The HOA thought they could break us, but they had just made us unstoppable. Have you ever seen a neighborhood band together against unfair rules? The day I met with the attorney, I felt like I was finally breathing after weeks of suffocation. Her name was Linda Perez, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer recommended by 3 different people in the HOA Horror Stories group. The moment I slid the $500 fine letter across her desk, her eyebrows shot up. "This is outrageous," she muttered, flipping through the pages. "They fined you for exercising your First Amendment rights. That's unconstitutional, and frankly, judges love smacking down HOAs for overreach like this." I let out a shaky laugh. "So, you think I have a case?" Linda leaned back, steepling her fingers. "Not only do you have a case, you might have a class action if other residents are willing to join. How many families got these ridiculous fines?" I thought about Sarah, Jenny, and the dozens of frustrated parents from the last meeting. My lips curled into a determined smile. Plenty. That night, Sarah and I went door to door, rallying neighbors. At first, people were hesitant. Some feared retaliation, more fines, threats, even foreclosure. But once we explained that Linda was ready to take on the HOA and that the law was on our side, something shifted. One dad, normally quiet and reserved, clenched his jaw and said, "My son hasn't been outside in 2 weeks. Count us in." Another mom whispered, "They fined me for having chalk drawings on the sidewalk." I'll testify by the end of the week, nearly 15 households had signed on. It wasn't just me anymore. It was us. The lawsuit hit like a bomb. Local news stations ran updates. Parents sue HOA for banning kids from playing. Social media amplified it with hashtags like #LetKidsPlay and #HOA tyranny trending locally. And the community? Oh, the energy was electric. For the first time, kids were seen playing again. Not because the rule was gone, but because parents dared the HOA to try fining them while we had a lawsuit pending. Laughter and joy trickled back into the streets. A beautiful rebellion against control. Emma, kicking her soccer ball with Sarah's boys, beamed at me one afternoon. "See, Mom? They can't stop us," I smiled, my heart swelling. "That's right, sweetheart. Not anymore." But the HOA wasn't done swinging. The board hired a fancy law firm and sent out a smug letter to every resident. The HOA intends to vigorously defend its right to enforce community standards. Langley strutted around like a king, warning people that this lawsuit could raise everyone's dues. It was a scare tactic, plain and simple, but it backfired. Parents rolled their eyes. One neighbor, usually quiet, confronted Langley at the mailbox. "If my dues go up, I'll know exactly who to blame. You." The cracks in their authority widened. When our first court date was announced, Sarah, Jenny, and I sat together, gripping hands like sisters before battle. The HOA thought they'd silenced us. But now it was our voices echoing louder than ever. Would you ever go to the media about a local injustice? Court days always felt like stepping into another world. The stale smell of old carpet, the wooden benches, the judge's gavel, it was intimidating. But the moment I saw how many neighbors showed up, my nerves settled. We weren't alone. Linda, our attorney, was brilliant. She stood tall before the judge, laying out the case in clear, undeniable terms. Your Honor, this HOA has not only overstepped its authority, but has actively harmed the families it claims to represent. Children are being fined for playing, residents are being silenced for speaking, and now my client has been punished for contacting the press. This is not governance. This is tyranny. I wanted to leap out of my seat and cheer. The HOA's lawyer, a slick man in a tailored suit, argued back. He framed the ban as reasonable noise regulation and claimed families were distorting facts to attract media attention. But the judge didn't look impressed. At one point, Linda held up the $500 fine letter. This right here? This is retaliation for speaking to the press. It's not only unlawful, it's un-American. The judge's eyebrows arched. That one landed. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the media frenzy grew louder. Reporters camped out on the steps, snapping photos and shouting questions. Parents held signs that read, "Let kids be kids. Stop HOA tyranny. Freedom to play." The HOA board members had to walk through that gauntlet every time. Faces red, lips tight. Langley, once so smug, now looked like a man trapped in a spotlight he couldn't escape. And the pressure wasn't just public, it was financial. As legal fees piled up, whispers spread about rising HOA dues. Families who had once stayed neutral began to turn. Even residents without kids grumbled, "Why are my dues paying for this nonsense?" The cracks in the board's support grew wider every day. At home, the mood shifted. Where silence had once ruled, joy was returning. Kids laughed again in the cul-de-sac, their voices carrying like battle cries of victory. One evening, Emma asked me, "Mom, are we winning?" I knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're fighting, sweetheart. And when you fight for what's right, you've already won." Her smile gave me strength, but the HOA wasn't going to roll over quietly. At the next board meeting, Langley slammed his gavel so hard it cracked. "We will not be bullied by media manipulation. This community has standards, and those who don't like them should consider moving." Gasps rippled through the room. Someone shouted, "Maybe you should move." The board was losing its grip, and they knew it. As I sat there, heart pounding, I realized something. This wasn't just about kids playing anymore. It was about power, and we were about to take it back. Do you think public exposure is the best way to deal with unfair HOAs? The final hearing felt different. The air in the courtroom buzzed with anticipation, as if everyone knew this was the day something big was about to happen. Our side of the room was packed. Parents, kids, even residents without children who were just sick of the HOA's heavy hand. Across the aisle sat the board members, stiff and pale, with Langley glaring at me like I'd personally destroyed his empire. Linda rose first. Her voice was steady, commanding. "Your Honor, this case is not complicated. The HOA has exceeded its authority. They've imposed unlawful restrictions on children's rights to use their own yards and streets. They've retaliated against residents for speaking out. And they've created a hostile environment in a community that is supposed to be a home." She held up the fine notice again, her voice sharp as a blade. "This isn't governance. This is punishment for daring to speak." The judge leaned forward, listening intently. When it was the HOA lawyer's turn, he stumbled. He tried to argue noise reduction and peaceful community standards, but every word rang hollow. The judge finally interrupted him. "Counsel, are you seriously suggesting that children playing outside constitutes a violation worthy of fines?" The lawyer stammered. Well, Your Honor, in certain cases." Enough. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. When the ruling came, I held my breath. The court finds that the HOA has acted outside the scope of its authority. The ban on children playing outside is hereby null and void. Any fines issued in relation to this rule are invalid. Furthermore, this court orders the HOA to cease retaliatory practices against residents who exercise their constitutional rights for a heartbeat. Silence. Then cheers erupted. People hugged, clapped, even cried. Sarah squeezed me so hard I could barely breathe while Jenny sobbed into her hands. Emma, sitting in the back with Sarah's kids, jumped up and down shouting, "We won! We won!" Across the room, the HOA board members looked shell-shocked. Langley's face was beet red, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. But his gavel couldn't save him this time. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as we walked down the steps. Reporters crowded in, microphones thrust forward. "How does it feel to win? What's next for your neighborhood?" I smiled, exhausted but triumphant. "It feels like freedom." This wasn't just about kids playing. It was about standing up to bullies. And we proved that when a community comes together, even the biggest bullies can be taken down. The crowd cheered. That night, the neighborhood transformed. Kids ran wild in the cul-de-sac. Parents set up lawn chairs. Someone even brought out a grill. The sound of laughter filled the air again, louder and brighter than ever. And as I watched Emma racing with her friends, her cheeks glowing in the streetlight, I felt tears prick my eyes. We hadn't just won a case, we'd taken back our home. How do you think the HOA leaders felt once they saw themselves on TV? In the weeks after the ruling, Crestwood Estates felt like a completely different place. For the first time in months, laughter filled the air without fear. Kids played basketball in driveways, rode bikes in packs, and filled the sidewalks with chalk drawings that stretched for blocks. Parents sat on porches, waving at each other with relief instead of suspicion. The HOA board, meanwhile, was crumbling. 2 members resigned almost immediately, citing health reasons. The treasurer quit next, fed up with the legal fees that had drained the HOA's budget dry. Langley held on longer, strutting around like a wounded dictator, but his power was gone. Eventually, under pressure, he too resigned. A special election was called, and for the first time, neighbors actually showed up to vote. Sarah was elected as the new HOA president with overwhelming support. Jenny took the treasurer role, handling the books with fairness and transparency. And me, they offered me a spot on the board, but I declined. I didn't want power. I just wanted peace. One evening, about a month later, Sarah and I sat in lawn chairs at the end of the cul-de-sac, sipping iced tea while our kids chased each other with water balloons. "Can you believe this?" Sarah asked, gesturing at the chaos. Just a few months ago, this street was silent. And now it feels like home again, I said, smiling. Jenny joined us a few minutes later, her daughter's laughter echoing behind her. You know, she said softly, if you hadn't stood up first, I don't think any of us would have had the courage. I shrugged, but her words sank deep. I hadn't set out to be a leader. I was just a mom who refused to let her daughter grow up thinking play was a crime. The story didn't die with the court ruling either. Local papers continued to follow it, and I even got invited to speak on a radio show about HOA overreach. Emails poured in from strangers across the country thanking me for standing up, sharing their own battles with neighborhood boards. It turned out our little cul-de-sac rebellion was part of something bigger, a reminder that rules should serve people, not control them. That night, as the kids settled down and fireflies lit the yard, Emma crawled onto my lap, her hair damp from the water fight. Mom, she whispered, thanks for fighting for us. My throat tightened. I kissed her forehead. Always, sweetheart. Always, she grinned and ran back to join her friends, her laughter floating through the summer night. I leaned back in my chair, letting the sound wash over me. We had been tested, bullied, threatened, and dragged through the mud. But we stood together, we pushed back, we won. And in doing so, we reclaimed something far greater than our right to play. We reclaimed our community. What lesson do you take away from this story about standing up for your rights?